Welcome, YouTube, to this DebateCraft politics conversation on vaccines. I'd like to thank Whiteflame and Mike for joining us. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, what up, guys? This is a topic that I think that we kind of see in the news, and it's kind of hot button in some ways. The entire topic of vaccines, whether they should be mandatory, how anti-vax people play into that, etc. I've got with me tonight Whiteflame. He has a lot of knowledge about this topic, so we're just going to have a general conversation about this. What's going on, Whiteflame?
Yeah, it's good to be here. Always nice to discuss this stuff on a Sunday night.
So how do you think overall, like, vaccines right now? You see some of the movement with I hate to say pro-Republican politics, but it tends to be the right wing that kind of like veers into this. What is your take? Believe me, and you have talked before, and if I recall, you think vaccines should be mandatory. Is that correct?
I believe some vaccines require mandates. For example, there are existing mandates for students going to school to get, say, the MMR vaccine to prevent the spread of extremely infectious diseases that are easily spread, like measles, that can badly affect a lot of those communities and are there, and those mandates are there specifically to protect populations in those schools that can't get vaccinated. So to some degree, what they're all trying to do is achieve what's called herd immunity, which is the degree to which the population must be covered by vaccines to prevent the spread of a given virus or bacteria through that population. And that number is exceedingly high for something like measles. And within a school population especially, it's very easy to spread. So the goal of mandating vaccines in those instances is to protect populations that are immunocompromised or in some other way unable to get the vaccine, and to do that you need to mandate it and increase the number of people who get it.
What do you say to the people that want to say bodily autonomy? It is their body, it's their right.
Well, there's two implied points there. One is that it's solely about bodily autonomy when one gets a vaccine, which isn't true. Getting a vaccine affects people around you as well. If you are unable to get a virus and thus shed the virus in close company with other people, then you are not spreading that virus to other people. It's very different, say, if you chose not to get a blood transfusion because that was against your decision for yourself. If you chose not to do that, then the only person that's hurting, the only person that's affecting is you. If you're talking about a vaccine, you're talking about a decision that affects everyone you could theoretically come into contact with. Now, the second point that was kind of implied there is a sort of a slippery slope argument. Couldn't this just extend to other viruses, other vaccines? And to some degree, there is room for that kind of discussion, but there are specific metrics that we are looking at for why a given virus should yield that conclusion. There's a reason why measles, for example, is such a dangerous virus that it warrants this kind of response to it, because the vaccine is very effective at preventing infection, it's very effective at preventing spread of the virus, and at the same time, the virus clearly has a high hit rate when it comes to not just infecting, but killing people as a result of that infection. And I would say that's the standard we have to set for any virus for any vaccine we require of people.
What's the difference? Because I know this is not the best argument, but it's something I hear people bring up all the time, right? Like, if you can do things that affect other people, like let's say smoking or drinking, like choices that could negatively impact others, right? Because you can smoke and you can smoke in public and people can be affected by it. To what extent is the vaccine necessary? how do you tie in like non-tested vaccines? And because I want to kind of bring this into the autism thing, right? Because there's a whole thing about vaccines cause autism and other symptoms, which I personally don't believe is true, but it is a talking point on the right. To what extent does somebody get to choose autonomy, and like where does it, how do you know where the line is at with that? Like when can you say this is important enough to have it, and what can you say what virus or what specific thing is you have the liberty to choose, if that makes sense?
So there are a bunch of points I'd like to respond to in there. One is there are limits we put societally on smoking and drinking alcohol. Like you can be arrested for many things under those headings. You're not allowed to drink and drive, because specifically the process of drinking and driving is what makes it excessively dangerous. There can be certain degrees of intoxication that you might, like public intoxication can be a big problem as a result, and can, land you behind bars depending on what you're doing. The application of secondhand smoke to other people is the reason why you're not allowed to smoke in certain buildings, in certain company, that kind of thing. We limit these things because we recognize that what one does can affect those around you, and you shouldn't be allowed free rein to do whatever you like, even with something that is legal. You are legally allowed to smoke, you are legally allowed to drink. That does not mean everything you do under that heading is okay and reasonable. Now, when it comes to vaccines and which ones should be required and all that, I'm not going to draw a specific line. I think there are certain vaccines that are clearly more relevant and important to certain populations and should be applied broadly and with mandates to ensure that you get as much of the population covered as possible. You mentioned COVID, and a couple of things I'd like to just bring up for the sake of clarity on this. Number one, they were very thoroughly tested before they were sent out to the public. The nature of that testing was different from the nature of previous virus testing, vaccine testing rather. And the reason for that was because we were in the middle of a pandemic. There were a lot of extreme cases going on where people were getting it in broad droves, and you needed to protect the most vulnerable populations. Does that mean that people should be required to take that vaccine? I would say not, until it's thoroughly tested to make sure that it does meet good safety standards. But remember as well, with these vaccines, with these mRNA vaccines in particular, that they had been in production far before COVID became a thing. There were many coronaviruses before this, and some of them already had RNA vaccines in production for them. They just stopped being big issues before they could reach the market with those vaccines. That research was repurposed for COVID-19 in particular and made that process so much faster. That's why it took 8 months to develop a vaccine as opposed to 4 years, which was the shortest time to a vaccine previous to that. The second thing is, you mentioned autism specifically. And while I know a lot of people fear that link between vaccination and autism, I'll point out that there is no evidence whatsoever that vaccines are linked to an increased prevalence of autism, that it causes autism in any case, that there's any connective tissue there. But there are clearly a lot of people who are concerned about that. I recognize that. I understand that that fear is present. And I recognize that if you are pushing vaccines on those people, they will retreat. There is going to be a negative response to that. That being said, the response to that should not be, okay, well, you don't have to take these vaccines and we can move on. The response to that needs to be, education. It needs to be improved communication of how these vaccines work. It needs to be improved research and delivery of that research to the public to ensure that they understand that lack of a causal link and that the vaccine is going to protect them and afford them the best form of protection compared with other options.
So let me take a shot in the dark here. You like RFK, right? Like he's your guy?
Decidedly not.
Do you think there is any backing to some of the... I mean, you've just went over a bunch of it, but what do you say to the right-wing administrations that's peddling this, right? Like, obviously, could there be cases and shit that's, like, external or, like, the rare possibility? Maybe, but, like, what do you say to the people that are, like, platforming this? Like, is it productive? Like, you were vehemently, right? Like, there's no possibility this is like some broad thing that's occurring with most people. Like my neighbor down the street whose daughter has autism after she got vaccines, like correlation equals not causation all the time. Like, do you think, like, what do you say to the people that are peddling these policies? Is it dangerous?
Yes, it's a desire to try and find out an answer, a straightforward answer to a question that is very hard to answer. Autism is a complicated set of conditions, and it's not even just a set of conditions, it's a spectrum of that set of conditions. And so the diagnostic criterion for it have changed over time. There's been a tremendous amount of change to who's diagnosing and how often, and that has changed the numbers for a lot of these. That is also, that's not to discount the fact that we have seen the number of people getting it seem to have increased. The problem is we need to avoid finding easy answers to this, locating specific things that we say, oh yes, this definitely causes it, because that does two things. One, it demonizes whatever they're looking at. So whether it's the vaccines or whether it's Tylenol for pregnant mothers, there is clearly a negative effect from doing that. People shun whatever that thing is. And I have heard that the idea here is that we should uphold a protective principle and make sure that these things are safe. But what we're losing in the process is safety. We're literally losing the ability for pregnant mothers to take pain medication and bring down symptoms that are dealing with fevers and the like. We're losing the ability to protect people from all kinds of viral infections. Those are protective effects that we are losing in service of just trying to find this simple out, this simple solution to a very complex problem. And the second problem is it's masking broader problems. Like, there could be a complex cause for these, and a lot of research is starting to uncover how that works. But when you say, this is what's causing it, we know the cause, we can move on, that funding for actually pursuing these complex causes dries up. You don't get the kind of support you need in order to pursue that kind of research that's delving into cause and effect and is able to find what should be helpful for society to change.
Autism in general, speaking about that, it's like, I kind of agree with you, because like the spectrum by itself, like if you viewed autism, as autism was 10 or 20 years ago, right? It was like a very narrow criteria for what autism was. I think by and large now, like what you can classify as autism with all the, like whether it's light or heavy, it's drastically changed, and the amount of people that are getting diagnosed with that has also increased because the spectrum itself has like almost increased in a way. I never loved RFK and hate the fact he's using that specifically and pinning it on vaccines. That's just one of the main things I see. Like, God, I'm from the South, and it's a lot more prevalent than what you think it would be down here, to the point it's kind of horrifying. Like, I get on my Facebook and I see multiple people talking about how bad this is. I think it was just an interesting topic, because I think you have a lot to offer, and I appreciate the time and being able to discuss some of this, because I think this is one of the topics, not that I'm passionate about many things, but I think the misinformation with vaccines and how scared people are is dangerous by and large, because misinformation is a killer, and I think you would agree with that, correct?
The key thing that I find so dangerous about this is that we're literally politicizing science. We're taking it to the point where if you believe a certain politics should be a certain way, that we should have Democrats in charge or Republicans in charge, that changes the way that you interact with scientific rigor, with what's actually coming out of papers and how much you take them with a grain of salt or accept them. And that should never be the case. Papers, the actual research should direct how people think about these things. And that makes it very difficult. It took many years for me to be able to read a scientific paper and understand what it was telling me, because the kind of language that a scientific paper uses is always going to be full of jargon, it's always going to be long, it's always going to be complicated, and it's always going to involve a tremendous amount of numbers and data that are difficult to parse. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of different interpretations of that data. Some of those interpretations might be different and still valid, but a lot of them end up just taking little bites out of conclusions or parts of the results and pretending that's the full breadth and depth of the research. And that's something we need to avoid. We need to consider all of what's going on in a research paper. And we need to understand that if we're hearing it from a secondary source that is interpreting the work, that we should always at least be considering how other sources view it too, so that we understand as fully as we can, as laymen or as scientists, anyone, how a given bit of research should apply to us and what we should do and what we should perceive as the evidence in society. And I think if we could all at least understand that much and all agree on that much, it would be a whole lot easier for research into vaccines to actually be meaningful to the entire population and not just a few.
Make sure we keep to the time. I just wanted to, again, thank you for showing up. I think it was very informative. And again, not many topics are I guess high priority to me, but this is one that I think a lot of people should pay a lot of attention to. So again, thank you for taking the time to join us and giving us your opinion. And as always, like, subscribe, comment on the video. It helps us out. And thank you guys for tuning in.